Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Onion Soup, the show where we pull back the layers of metaphysics and reality in order to demystify spirituality. Today, we have Mr. Terry Tucker. And Mr. Terry is a motivational speaker and author, but you're also a cancer warrior. How are you doing today, Mr. Terry?
I'm great, Dexter. Thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
Thanks. I'm excited to talk to you as well, 'cause I think your story is truly fascinating. But can you tell us a little bit about your journey, just where everything started from you, and then honestly, like how you got to here?
Yeah, so I am the oldest of three boys. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6 foot 8 inches tall and actually went to college on a basketball scholarship. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this is long before the internet was available to help people find employment. The good
Mhm.
news was is that I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. The bad news was is I spent the next 3.5 years living at home, helping my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. Professionally, as I said, started out at Wendy's. Then I switched to hospital administration. I actually went to work for the hospital that took care of my father and my grandmother. And then I made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did during that journey was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls' high school basketball. But for the last 12 years now, I've been battling this rare form of cancer. And then I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married for 30 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United
Mhm.
States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
That's so interesting. I know we were talking about the Space Force a moment there, and I just want to go to when you were talking about the form of cancer that you have, because you were saying that you did have the tumors removed, but the treatment after became toxic for you.
I did. I have a very rare form of melanoma, and most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun, and it affects the melon, the pigment in our skin. Mine is a rare form that has nothing to do with sun exposure. It appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands, and mine appeared on the bottom of my foot. So I did. I had that tumor excised. I had all the lymph nodes in my groin removed. But at the time, this was 2012. I was told this would be a death sentence, that more than likely I'd be dead in 2 years. But I was given a death sentence and thought, well, maybe I can turn a death sentence into a life sentence.
Mhm.
And so I've spent these last 12 years going through ridiculous therapies and treatments. Had my foot amputated in 2018, had my leg amputated in 2020, right in the middle of the COVID pandemic. I still have tumors in my lungs, which I'm treated for every 3 weeks. So this has just been an ongoing cycle of cancer and treatment and cancer and treatment. I've never been in remission. I've never had really any time off during these 12 years. It's just been a constant fight, constant struggle.
Yeah. So at one point, you're quoted as saying each day is a struggle, but you have to use your mind to override your body. Can you tell us about how you're using your mind to really keep going?
Yeah, I really think the mind controls the body. If you can't control your mind, you're going to have a very difficult time with all the other things that are going on in your body. And so people ask me, how do you do that? And I don't think it's real hard. And what I recommend to people, because I do this every day myself, is to do one thing every day that scares you, that makes you nervous, that is uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But if you do those small things, those little increments over time, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us, we
Mhm.
lose somebody who's close to us, we get let go from our job, we find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness, you'll be so much stronger, so much more resilient to handle that adversity when it presents itself.
I think that's so powerful because when I think a lot of times we put a lot on our plates and we think that we have to get all these things accomplished at the same time, but to just focus and hone in on one. It one does narrow your focus and your ability to be hyperactive in an area of your life, but it does improve resilience. And what you'll find is that by improving one area and growing in your own resilience, you can improve all the other aspects of your life. So, how did this lead into what you call the four truths? What is that?
Yeah, the four truths. I actually have them here on a post-it note. They're in my office, so I see them multiple times during the day, and they constantly get reinforced in my mind. And I'll give them to you. They're just one sentence each.
Mm,
So the first one is, as we were just talking about, control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life, and use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more resilient individual. The third one I look at more as a legacy type of truth, and it's this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one I think is pretty self explanatory: as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And Dexter, I look at these four truths kind of, I call them the bedrock of my soul. I think they're just a good place to start to try to build a quality life off of.
At what point did you develop these? Was it in the middle of all of your treatments? Were you just did it just come to you one day? How did that just
It's actually kind of a funny story. I was on a podcast that was entitled "My Three Truths," and I was like,
mm,
"Well, I better have three truths," when I go on to this show. And so yes, there are things I've learned over my life, but they have really kind of crystallized during these last 12 years of battling cancer. And initially, I had three of them, and I added the legacy truth just because I felt it was that important to me.
mm,
And so they're just they're things that I use when I'm trying to decide, should I take a treatment? Is this something I should do, or is there a project that I want to get involved in? Is it something that will be good for me, good for my family, and things like that? So they're not just, and I have a very strong faith life on top of this,
mhm,
but they're not just something that I throw out. I mean, I try to live them every single day of my life.
mm. How does your faith play into your everyday life?
Yeah, I talk about what I call my three F's, which are faith, family, and friends, and how those have gotten me through my life, but certainly through cancer. And it's funny. I've seen so many people start down the road toward a goal, and then they butt up against an impediment. Something gets in their way, and they can't get over, around it, or through it, and so they quit. But we just don't quit. Now we got to blame somebody.
Mhm,
We got to blame our parents, or our station in life, or our boss. And so when I got cancer, people were like, "Well, who do you blame?" I'm like, "What do you
mm,
mean? Who do I blame?" So, well, you've got to blame somebody because you've got this horrible disease. I'm like, "No, I don't blame anybody." And then when they find out I have a faith life, that there's a component that's a little bit deeper than just the surface, they're like, "Well, you got cancer. You must blame God." And
mm,
I kind of used to joke with him. I'm like, no, I don't think God got up on a Tuesday morning, checked his to-do list, and said, "Hey, Terry Tucker, cancer today." I don't believe that at all. But I'll tell you, Dexter, there are a couple things that have a couple incidences. One, after I had my tumors initially excised, cut out, I was put on a drug called interferon, which gave me severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after I took the injection. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So
mm,
imagine having the flu every week for 5 years. And that wasn't a cure. That was, as my oncologist used to say, we're kicking the can down the road. And I kind of felt that there were sort of two camps. There was the "I'm living" camp, and then there was the "I'm not dying" camp. And
mm,
I was in that not dying camp. I didn't really feel I was alive. I wasn't contributing. At least I didn't feel like I was. And I literally prayed to die. I never contemplated suicide. I don't want anybody to think that.
mhm.
But I literally prayed to die. And it got to a point where it's like, okay, God, I'm not doing anything. I'm not contributing. Take me out of this. But he didn't. but he did give me the strength to literally live day to day. I mean, if you would have asked me at that time, what were your goals? My goal would have been, I'm going to try to get up tomorrow morning. That's literally my
Mhm,
goal. And the other story was after I had my leg amputated and I found out I had these tumors in my lungs, my oncologist about 6 months later showed me my CAT scan.
mhm,
And I have no medical background. I don't know how to read a CAT scan, but you can kind of look at it and be like, well, that sure doesn't look like it belongs there. I had these big tumors in my lungs. I had fluid all around the pleural spaces on kind of the outside of my lungs. And I remember looking at my oncologist and saying, how was I alive? And Dexter, I'll never forget this. He put his head down, he shook his head no, and then he lifted his head up and he looked at me and he said, I don't know because you shouldn't have been,
mm.
which said to me that God's not done with me yet. And so when I die, where I die, how I die, way above my pay grade. Don't spend a lot of time worrying about the dying. Spend more time focusing on the living.
So, what is living? Because you talk about your goal at one point was just to get out of bed, and I know for a lot of people that can be a struggle. But what does it mean to truly be alive?
I've been asked. I guess let me kind of go to the end of that. I've been asked how do I want to be remembered,
Mm,
and my response has always been I don't want to be remembered. I mean, 100 years from now, nobody's going to know that I was even here. But what I want to do, why I'm here, is I want to connect. I want to connect with people. I've read a lot. I think when you sort of face death, at least for me, I've always wanted to know my opponent. When I was playing basketball and
yep,
things like that, I wanted to know about my opponent. I wanted to scout my opponent. And so I've read a
mm,
lot about people who have had near death experiences. And there seems to be an overarching theme during those readings in that when people go wherever they go, and whether they meet Jesus, whether they meet a family friend, whether they meet a relative, whether they meet an angel, whoever it is, the one question that everybody seems to get asked is, what did you do while you were on earth? What did you do while you were alive to treat other people or to help other people? It's sort of what's the greatest commandment? Love your God. What's the second greatest commandment? Love your neighbor as yourself. And
mm,
so it's like, did you love your God? Yes, I did. And then what did you do with my people? What did you do with the people that you interacted with? And so it's that connection. It's that bringing it together, making a difference. I mean, if COVID taught us anything, it's how much we need each other.
yeah,
During COVID, when we were all isolated, alcoholism rates went up, drug abuse rates went up, domestic violence rates went up. We need each other. We're not good separately. We're much better as a group or being together to make ourselves live our dreams, make our dreams happen, be successful in life. Nobody does that in a vacuum. We do it as a group.
wow. It's interesting because when we were talking earlier about why I got started in doing this, that is one of the reasons because I really want to help people, and the best way I know how to help people is to talk to others, and really just get the information out there to show that you're not alone. And there is someone that's going through what you're going through or probably has gone through something similar, and we can help each other, and that your story can really influence and drive someone and probably save someone else's life. But one thing that you said that I find really fascinating is how you decided you want to know your opponent, like you were looking at death like it was an adversary, something to fight up against. Even though that's, and I always tell people death is the only inevitability we have in life. Outside of
Yeah, we all get it once,
that,
right?
yeah, we're all gonna do it. Outside of that, you don't know what's gonna happen. But as you started diving more deeply into the aspects of death and the afterlife, what was that you found comfort in that allowed you to say, "I need to go live more?"
Yeah, I mean, when I found out I had these tumors in my lungs, and I after I had my leg amputated, I went with my wife to the mortuary, to the cemetery, and to the church, and I planned my funeral.
Mm,
And because I go on podcasts like yours, or I speak to people in person about motivation and the need to keep moving forward, I actually got some brushback from people who commented that somehow planning my funeral was in some way defeatist.
mm,
And I kind of had to remind these folks that the last time I checked, we're all going to die. Don't think anybody's working on a cure for life right now. I mean, every one of us is going to die,
mhm,
but not every one of us is really going to live. And I heard a Native American Blackfoot proverb years ago that I absolutely love, and I'll share it with you. It goes like this: when you were born, you cried, and the world rejoiced.
Mm.
Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for. And there's something when you plan your funeral, when you've got it all taken care of and paid for and all that stuff. There's something freeing about knowing that, yeah, okay, I'm good. I've got that's all taken care of. Now let's get on with the business of living. Let's get on with the business of connecting with other people and trying to make a difference. And it's just I think if you live your purpose, that's another thing that I think that's important. Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning talked about how we all have a purpose in life, that it's not something abstract. You
Mhm.
all have a purpose, and we have a moral responsibility to find that purpose in life and live it. And I think the people that find that purpose and live that purpose, for them death is not nearly as scary as all those people who kind of muddle through life and never even look to find the reason that they were put on the face of this earth.
Wow. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. It's really difficult to, one, find your purpose, but then just to go out and live that purpose is a whole other story. And it's pretty scary. But we're gonna take a really quick commercial break, and I'll see you when we get back.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. So before we left, we were talking about living your purpose, and you recently wrote a book where you talk pretty much about that, right? You talk about how we're all deserving of a uncommon and extraordinary life. Can you tell us about your new book?
Yeah, the book is called Sustainable Excellence: The 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And it's really a book that was born out of two conversations that I had. One was with a former player that I had coached when I was coaching high school basketball, who moved to the area in Colorado where my wife and I live with her fiance. And the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner that I was excited that she was living close to me and I could watch her find and live her purpose. And Dexter, she got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, well, coach, what do you think my purpose is?
Hmm.
And I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, using your unique gifts and talents, and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man in college who reached out to me on social media and he asked me what I thought were the most important things that he should learn, not to just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And I didn't want to give him get up early, work hard, help others. I didn't want to give him sort of the cliches that we all know are important, and they are important. I wanted to see if I could go deeper with him. So I spent some time taking some notes and kind of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath that principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates this principle. So, literally, during the months I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how sustainable excellence came to be.
So when you talk about finding your purpose, how did you find, or do you feel like you're living your purpose first? How did you find that? How did you discover this is what you wanted to do?
And that's a great question. And I think we tend to think of our purpose in the singular, like there's one thing that we're supposed to do. And at least in my life, I think it's been purposes, plural. when I was younger, I felt my purpose literally was to be an athlete. I mean, I lived, ate, drank, slept basketball. It was it was in my heart. It was in my soul. And then as I transitioned into more of an adult, I felt my purpose was to be in law enforcement. My grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954, and I felt I wanted to follow in his footsteps. Now, the impediment there was my father. My grandfather was shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury, he was shot in the ankle. But my dad, who was an infant at the time, remembered the stories my grandmother told about that knock on the door of Mrs. Tucker, come with us, bring your son, your husband's been shot. So when I expressed an interest in doing that, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college, you're going to major in business, you're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's the life my father wanted me to lead. That's not the life that I felt I was put on this earth to do. So that was, I guess, my second purpose. And now with my cancer journey, and in all honesty, more than likely coming to the end of my life, I think my purpose now has changed again to put more goodness, positivity, motivation, love back into the world with whatever time I have left. So, we all like to think, boy, our purpose, if we could get it to be our job or our occupation, that would be great. And yeah, it would. But don't feel that it has to be. I mean, your job could be something over here. It's what you do to pay the bills, but
Mhm.
your purpose is over here, and it's to be a podcast host or to write or to paint or to whatever it is you think you're supposed to do. And I'll end with this. Whenever I talk to especially younger people, I always tell them, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be those things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do. And by then, it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Yeah, that's 100% where I am currently. People oftentimes ask about the show and like, how's everything going? You're being an entrepreneur. And I don't know, for some reason, I think people, you, when you say that you're an entrepreneur, that you're instantly like rolling in money. I I still work at a 9 to 5 job, but this is my passion. This is truly what I want to do. And it's exactly like you said, I was terrified to do this when I first got started. Didn't I love talking to people, but the idea of sitting behind the camera and doing it was the scary part. But I love doing it and I wanted to share with everyone. So that's what drove me into it. And then furthermore, to say that one's purpose one's purpose changes over time is true as well, because for many years, I thought my purpose was to be a scientist. So, I went to school, got a degree, and I was gonna go get a PhD and decided, nope, I don't wanna do that anymore. This is where I wanna be, and this does feel good. It makes me feel happy. But we only have a few minutes left. What do you wanna leave with the audience?
Um, Let me leave this story. I've got my stories are usually about basketball or nurses because I spend so much time at the hospital. So I interact with so many nurses. I had a nurse recently ask me what it was like to have my foot amputated in 2018 and my leg amputated in 2020. And I told her, I said, it certainly has not been easy. When you're 6'8", learning to walk again, falling is not an option. You get hurt from this height. So, it's not like you're a little kid and you just kind of roll over and stuff. But what I told her was cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind, it can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Dexter. That's who everybody who's listening to us is. And we spend a tremendous amount of time working on this vessel, this house, this body. We eat right, we go to the gym, we get enough rest, we reduce stress. And I'm not telling you not to do that. You absolutely should do that. But what I am suggesting is maybe every day, spend a little more time working on who you really are, that heart, that mind, that soul. We know this body's going to die. We know it's going to decay and go away. But your heart, your mind, and your soul, those things I believe are eternal. Those things live on. And I just don't think we spend nearly enough time working on them while we're here on earth.
I 100% agree. A lot of times, I tell people, know thyself. Do you really know yourself? How often do you sit in silence by yourself? Can you sit in silence by yourself? There are a lot of people that can't. People are attached to their phones and attached to different aspects of social media and all this other technology. Nothing wrong with those things, but be with your own thoughts. And I think it's difficult for people to do that sometimes.
Yeah, if I could just follow up on that real quick, there's a book called "Do Hard Things" by Steve Magnus, and Magnus used to be the head track and field coach at the University of Minnesota, and he tells a story in his book about researchers at the University of Minnesota that took young people
Mhm.
and put them in a room for about 20 minutes. The only thing in the room was a table and a chair, but they were not allowed to have any devices with them. No cell
Mm.
phones, no iPads, no earbud, nothing. The only other thing in that room was a buzzer. And if you pressed the buzzer, you received an electric shock. 68% of the men and 25% of the women shocked themselves, including one guy who shocked himself on average every 5 seconds, which told those researchers, just like you said,
Mhm.
we're not comfortable in our own skin. Our identity is tied to that phone. You got whatever somebody says about you on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. That's the gospel. And what he was recommending was spend, and I do this every day, spend 5 or 10 minutes just being alone with yourself, not necessarily meditating, praying, or anything. Let your mind go wherever your mind goes, but be comfortable in your own skin. Be comfortable being with yourself. Because until you're able to do that, anything else outside of that is very difficult to actually make happen.
I 100% agree. I actually do that all the time. I love sitting in silence. It probably sounds weird to a lot of people, but I sit in silence to be with my own thoughts. And really, I do it in the morning when I wake up, and then I do it before bed to reflect on the day. But I want to thank you so much, Mr. Terry, for coming on and really sharing your story and your journey with us.
Well, Dexter, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you.
And thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Have a great one. Bye.